Yoroshiku. Welcome to the Sunday stream from Daishu-in West. I'm Koju. Last week, we had a visitor arrive from Holland. She's been here all week. She's doing a fine job, doing some repapering of windows and lots of sound work this week. Another well, there's never any shortage of things to do at a temple for sure. But the windows were getting torn up and ratty, and fortunately we had an extra pair of hands to replace all the paper. So last week I brought up Zuigan Roshi, Goto Zuigan Roshi, and we have a scroll of his hanging in the tokonoma right now. So he's very present. And in this tradition, anyway, I don't know how many people out there are going to have read Morinaga Soka Roshi's autobiography, but he talks in that about when he first came to Daishu-in as a young man in the war, or just shortly after the war had ended, before he had a chance to go out and get killed overseas, and having lost the family land and his parents, suddenly dying and being at loose ends, coming to the temple and asking to be taken in, and Goto Zuigan says. Listens to this whole sob story of his and says, okay, I'll take you in, just as you are right now, if you trust me unconditionally. And that's it. And so young, Soko says, not yet Soko, but says, hi, I trust you. Please let me train here. And, begins his discipleship there at Daishu-in. And that is this particular lineage's story that expresses a very, very simple aspect of the entrance to practice, which is that until we can humble ourselves, lower our heads, and make that initial leap, then nothing is really possible at all. You can receive all the explanations and hear all the talks in the world, and if you do not yourself make that one initial step, then nothing is actually happening anyway. And a friend lent me a book. It's called The Abundance of Less, Lessons in Simple Living from Rural Japan. And it's just 10 stories about different people, Japanese people, who, sort of went back to the land in Japan, in their various ways. And this one fellow, he goes and he lives in a little village in Shikoku and is just living on, a few $1,000s a year, in terms of total economic activity, and decides he's going to take up the flute. And he hears a record, I think. He hears a record and he decides, okay, I'm going to take up the flute. And he starts looking around for a guru. He says in the book, he spent some time in India, so he says he was looking for a guru. And he finds one. And the guru that he finds is a Zen guy who plays the flute, and was one of these sort of mendicant beggars that would, they would do their begging, 100 years ago in Japan, standing out there. They look a lot like Rinzai Unsui. They have the big hat, except that they're standing there with a big flute and playing the flute. And then they have a thing with a fan, where they open up a fan at the end, and if you want to make a donation, then you put the money on the fan, and they put it in this box without touching it, just like a monk. They're monks. But in a very different, the way of the flute, or the kyotaku, which is kind of, it looks like a larger shakuhachi, if you know about shakuhachi. So he goes and he asks his guru if he can train there. And his guru says, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll take you on if you need to go find this piece of bamboo, and it has to be this size. Not just this size, it has to be this species, this size, this age. The walls have to be this thick. There has to be this much space in between the nodes, etc., etc., etc. Go out, find me this piece of bamboo, and you can start discipleship with me. And of course he goes on, he can't find, it's nowhere to be found. He's just scanning. He searches for months, and of course it's rural Japan, so there's bamboo all over the place. He cannot find a piece of bamboo. So he goes back, and of course that's the whole point. It's not. Eventually, his guru, gives him a flute to practice with, and just sends him off to play just one simple note. Never gave him any, lessons of teaching, how to hold it or how to breathe or what to do. He just said, okay, you take this flute and you go and you just play this one note, the deepest note, the hardest note to play. And you do that for the next half a year, and you don't have to commute back and forth. I don't need to see you again. Don't waste your time. Just go. If you want to learn the flute, just go and play this one note for the next 6 months. And so he does. And that was his discipleship. And he would sometimes go and meet with his guru, and his guru would talk to him. Never really talk to him about the flute or show him anything about the flute, but just check him out. Just look at him, watch him, and talk to him about things, and that would be it. He said maybe once in 3 years, he actually said something about flute technique, the mental part about playing the flute. So here again, we find this way of teaching, which requires an initial leap. It isn't. It's never handed to us on a platter. It needs reciprocation. In fact, you have to do it yourself, and there's no. Nobody can do it. Nobody can do it for you, of course. And that's okay. So that's another Rinzai example, shall we say? And of course, in the yogic tradition, my yoga teacher Rie and I have been looking at this interview. I mentioned it a few weeks ago with her teacher Rolf, and in that the exact same thing. He talks about how Guruji, his teacher, would that the traditional way of teaching in India was that you go to a guru and you ask to be taught, and he says, okay, if you want to learn from me, then okay, you do seva, you do devotional work for 7 years or so, and then maybe then I teach you something. Like that is the traditional way that yoga would be taught. And Guruji, did things a little bit differently because he, took money, and I bet that in his day that was a new way of doing things. But what are you going to do? You got a bunch of people that come and want to learn yoga. That's how we're doing things now. But in all traditions, that's how you start, by devotional work, by that, do you trust me? For 7 years or so, and then, something maybe can grow. But if that foundation, if that basic trust hasn't been established, then really not very much is going on, I think. It begins with that leap. And from the point of view of a person, it seems like a leap. Really, it's just not being confused, as we say all the time. It's a giving up of confusion. But from the point of view of an individual, it seems like a stretch. It seems like a jump. It seems risky because we have to sacrifice, that which we think we know all the time, over and over and over again. And constantly we fall back into error, and we say, okay, I'm doing it again. Hopefully, we notice the error, and then maybe something can grow. But if we're not actively, moment by moment, reciprocating to that, making that leap from the point of view of a person, then what can happen? Then the opening isn't even there. And I think constantly, we come back from, it's not just doing seva or devotional work for 7 years even. We always have to maintain that carriage, that attitude of service, and like just gratitude and reciprocation for the teaching itself. And that in that it's already completed. In that the understanding is manifest. And so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which tradition. There's a wonderful little passage here that I'd like to share. He also says, I forgot to say, but sometimes in the course of this guy's tutelage, he would show up. He would just come to to ask a question or something, and his guru would chase him off. He would just watch him kind of walk up towards his house from the Engawa, from the little porch, and he would see him come, and he would say, no, I can see you're all caught up in something. Just go home, practice more. And there's a lot of parallels with Zen stories, where the Roshi just brings you out because they see how you enter the room. They don't even want to hear it. He said, he didn't teach me anything. He didn't say, as I expected, hold your fingers here or shape your mouth like this. He simply told me to go home and play only this one note for the next half year. He said, don't waste your time coming back and forth. It was like he saw my entire character in one glance, like he was holding me in the palm of his hand, turning his head this way and that. He saw what I needed. That's wonderful. It's just a simple, and he can only play 7 songs. Just plays those 7 songs, and that is his practice. And now he, like I said at the beginning, he lives on, just like a few $1,000s a year, but they need a few $1,000s a year, he and his wife. And so his way of getting some money now is now to put on the hat and go out into town and do the mendicant begging thing, which you hardly see these days in modern Japan. So it is coming full circle. Right. Well, as always, if you want to get in contact with the temple, contact at Daishu-in-West.org. I'll be back, not this next Sunday, because I will be in Seattle, but the Sunday after that, at 1:30 Pacific Time. As always, you're welcome to come and visit Daishu-in West. Please just get in contact before you do.